They were daughters, mothers, wives, neighbors, women society trusted completely until the moment they became something no one saw coming, each one more shocking than the last. Some were executed, some are still out there. This is capital true crime. Toni Jo Henry, February 14, 1940. Rural Louisiana, Valentine's Day. A salesman named Joseph Calloway was driving a brand new Ford Coupe through the Louisiana rain, heading to a business meeting. He saw a young woman on the side of the road, thumb out, soaking wet. Being a decent man, he pulled over. It was the last decision he ever made. The woman was Annie Beatrice McQuiston, known to everyone as Toni Jo Henry, 23 years old, jet black hair. Described by reporters as breathtakingly beautiful. But behind those eyes was someone who had lived through a childhood most people couldn't survive. Orphaned young, working in brothels by 13. Arrested multiple times before she could legally vote. By the time she flagged down Joseph Calloway, Toni Jo had one mission: break her husband out of a Texas prison. She needed money, a car, and absolutely no witnesses. Calloway had all three problems. She and her accomplice forced him into the trunk at gunpoint. They drove him down a desolate country road, ordered him out, made him strip naked in the pouring rain, walked him behind a haystack, and told him to get on his knees and say his prayers. He begged for his life. She shot him once between the eyes, the WTF moment. She confessed everything to her own aunt, who immediately called the police. After 3 separate trials, each one ending in a death sentence, Toni Jo Henry walked to the electric chair on November 28, 1942. She was 26 years old. Chain-smoking until the end, cracking jokes about her lifetime lighter, she sat down calmly, smiled at the reporters, and was gone in seconds. She remains the only woman ever executed in Louisiana's electric chair. But if Toni Jo's story ended in the chair, the next woman's ends the exact same way. Only the crime was something far darker. Case 2. Bonnie Emily Heady, September 28, 1953, Kansas City, Missouri. A nun opened the front door of an elite Catholic school. Standing on the step was a woman in tears, claiming to be the aunt of one of the students. She said the boy's mother had just suffered a heart attack. She needed to take him to the hospital immediately. The nun believed her. She went and retrieved the child. 6-year-old Bobby Greenlease walked out holding the woman's hand, trustingly, without a second thought. Bobby was never seen alive again. The woman was Bonnie Emily Heady, 51 years old, former farm owner, former horsewoman, 5, and the girlfriend of a career criminal named Carl Hall, who was mainlining heroin and burning through stolen money faster than he could steal it. Their plan was shockingly methodical. The night before the abduction, they dug a shallow grave in Bonnie's own backyard, in the pouring rain, and celebrated afterward with whiskey. Bobby Greenlease was the son of one of the wealthiest men in the Midwest. They demanded $600,000 in ransom. At the time, it was the largest ransom in American history. Here's the part that stops you cold. Bobby was already dead. He had been killed within hours of being taken, shot twice by Carl Hall after the boy fought back. Bonnie helped bury him in her garden while his family desperately gathered the cash. For 8 days, they cashed ransom notes and made phone calls, all while Bobby lay beneath the flowers in Bonnie's yard. They were arrested within 48 hours of collecting the money. Carl Hall had been tipping hotel bellhops with $100 bills. On November 19, 1953, the jury deliberated for exactly 68 minutes. Both were sentenced to death. Bonnie Heady was executed by gas chamber on December 18, 1953, just 81 days after the crime. She held Carl's hand one last time before the door sealed shut. 2 executions. 2 women who felt nothing for their victims. But the next case proves you don't need a weapon to kill hundreds. Case 3. Masumi Hayashi, July 25, 1998. Wakayama City, Japan. It was a summer festival. Neighbors gathering for curry, music, and community. Children running between food stalls. Elderly residents sitting in folding chairs, laughing by nightfall. 67 people were fighting for their lives. 4 of them lost. Masumi Hayashi was 47 years old, married to a termite exterminator, and living a lifestyle no one could explain. Luxury cars, a massive home, gambling debts paid in cash, and no visible source of income except a trail of suspicious insurance payouts stretching back years. Her husband's job meant the household had legal access to industrial arsenic. Sodium arsenite, white powder, odorless, nearly tasteless. The perfect poison. During the festival, Hayashi was assigned to watch the communal curry pot. She was left alone with it for 40 minutes. That evening, neighbors began collapsing, vomiting, clutching their stomachs. Ambulances overwhelmed hospitals across Wakayama. Doctors assumed bacterial food poisoning. They were wrong the W-to-Fief moment. Scientists used a particle accelerator, the Spring 8 synchrotron, to analyze the arsenic found in the victims' bodies and the curry pot. The molecular fingerprint was an exact match to industrial poison found hidden inside the Hayashi home. It was the first time a particle accelerator had ever been used to secure a death sentence. When media camped outside her house, Hayashi grabbed a garden hose and soaked them. Laughing, she was arrested in October 1998. Convicted in 2002. 5 sentenced to death. As of 2026, Masumi Hayashi has spent over 27 years on death row at Osaka Detention House. She is 64 years old. In Japan, inmates are not told their execution date until the morning it happens. Every single day, she wakes up not knowing if today is the day. She continues filing appeals for retrial. Every single one has been rejected. Japan carries out executions in silence. The next case takes us to Louisiana, where a mother carried out something unthinkable in silence too. Case 4, AMT Hebert, August 20th, 2007, Lafourche Parish, Louisiana. When teachers noticed 2 children hadn't shown up to school, they assumed illness. When Amy Hebert didn't show for her shift as a teacher's aide, a coworker drove by the house to check. No one answered the door. Amy's ex-husband called 911. His father drove over and broke in. What he found inside left him unable to speak. His grandchildren, both of them, lay in the master bedroom, covered in blood. Amy was in the same bed, clutching them, bleeding from over 30 self-inflicted wounds, including stab wounds to her own eyelids. Amy Hebert was 42 years old, deeply devout, a Sunday school teacher, and by all outward appearances, a devoted mother. Her neighbor called her exemplary. Her community adored her. But behind closed doors, her marriage had collapsed. Her ex-husband was remarrying, and prosecutors would later argue she had been consumed by a rage she couldn't contain. 9-year-old Camille and 7-year-old Braxton had been stabbed a combined total of more than 80 times. The medical examiner testified that each child had been stabbed 4 times directly through the heart. The suicide notes she had written, accusing her ex-husband of ruining their family, were found on the kitchen counter. Forensics confirmed they had been written before the attacks began. She told investigators she heard voices. The defense called it a psychotic break. The prosecution called it premeditated revenge. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty. 2 counts of first-degree murder. The death penalty vote was 9-3, 1 vote short of the required unanimous 12. So instead, Judge Jerome Barbera sentenced her to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. As of 2026, Amy Hebert has spent nearly 19 years inside the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. She is 58 years old. She will never be released. Louisiana locks its killers away. But what happens when a killer wears a badge of faith and uses it to starve her patients to death? If you're finding value in these stories right now, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Seriously, those 2 small actions are the single biggest way you can say thank you for the hours that go into researching every one of these cases. Every click tells us to keep going, keep digging, keep telling these stories, and trust me, the cases coming up next are ones you will not forget. Case 5. Linda Burfield Hazzard. 1911. Olala, Washington. Locals called it Starvation Heights deep in the woods of Kitsap County. A woman who had never earned a medical degree had built a remote clinic where wealthy patients paid enormous sums to be cured through one method: total starvation. Dr. Linda Burfield Hazzard, self-appointed, self-published, and absolutely certain of her own genius, had been practicing since the late 1800s. By 1911, at least a dozen patients had died under her care. Claire and Dora Williamson were wealthy British heiresses who spotted her book at a hotel in Victoria, Canada. Within months, they were living at Hazzard's Olala property, surviving on 1 cup of diluted vegetable broth per day, subjected to hour-long high-pressure enemas and violent massage sessions that witnesses described as aggressive beatings. By May 1911, Claire Williamson weighed less than 50 pounds. She died on the 18th, while Hazzard had already secured power of attorney over the sisters' estates and was actively draining their accounts. The WTF moment? When their childhood nurse arrived from Australia to rescue Dora, she found a skeleton wearing a woman's clothing. Hazzard blocked legal removal by declaring Dora mentally incompetent, a woman she had nearly starved to death. Hazzard was arrested in August 1911, convicted of manslaughter in 1912. Sentenced to 2 to 20 years, and served less than 2, she was pardoned, ordered to leave the country, went to New Zealand, came back, opened the same clinic under a different name, and ran it for 15 more years until a fire burned it to the ground in 1935. On June 24, 1938, Linda Burfield Hazzard fell ill. She attempted to cure herself through fasting. She died of self-inflicted starvation. She was 70 years old. A woman who starved others to death was ultimately consumed by her own method. The next woman had a method far more calculated and far more profitable. Case 6. Susan Diane Hendricks. October 14, 2011. Liberty, South Carolina. At 6:30 in the morning, Evelyn Burns received a phone call from her sister Susan. The conversation was strange, flat, casual, almost bored. Then Susan mentioned, almost in passing, that her son Matthew had shot himself. Evelyn drove over immediately. What she found wasn't a single tragedy. It was 4. Susan Diane Hendricks was 48 years old, deeply religious, a self-described devoted mother. A decorative sign on her front porch read, "God bless this home and all who enter." Inside, investigators found her 2 sons, 23-year-old Matthew and 20-year-old Marshall, along with her ex-husband, 52-year-old Mark, and her 64-year-old stepmother Linda. All 4 had been shot. All 4 were dead. The staging was meticulous. Matthew's body was arranged in bed, a handgun placed beside him, a note on the kitchen counter, designed to look like a suicide. But Matthew's hands tested negative for gunshot residue. Susan's clothing tested positive for a substantial amount. Detectives found the motive locked inside a bedroom safe. 9 individual life insurance policies, her 2 sons, her ex-husband, her stepmother. Susan Diane Hendricks listed as the sole beneficiary on every single one. Total payout, over $680,000. She had been systematically insuring her family members, and then eliminating them. The WTF moment. 5 years earlier, she had shot and killed a neighbor in the same house. It was ruled self-defense. She reportedly reminded people of that killing whenever she was angry. In April 2013, Hendricks pleaded guilty but mentally ill to all 4 counts of murder. As of 2026, Susan Diane Hendricks has spent nearly 15 years inside the Camille Griffin Graham Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. She is 62 years old. She will never leave. 4 people killed for an insurance payout. The next woman targeted someone far more specific and spent years making sure no one suspected a thing. Mid-video engagement. Before we get into the next case, I need to know something. We cover cases from all over the world on this channel. 5, and I'm genuinely curious. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments. It never stops amazing me how far this community reaches, from Louisiana to London to Lagos. Tell me where you are. I'll be reading every single one. Case 7, Miriam Francis Helmick, June 10, 2008. Whitewater, Colorado. Alan Helmick was a widower, a successful businessman, a grandfather of 5. He loved golf, Lake Powell, and the phrase he said whenever money was tight, "I wonder what the poor people are doing." He met Miriam at a dance studio in 2005. She was his instructor. She was charming, attentive, and nothing like his late wife. They married in June 2006. Within a year, he was bedridden with mysterious symptoms. Within 2 years, he was dead, shot once in the back of the head in his own kitchen. Miriam called it a robbery. Investigators called it something else. Forensic analysis of her computer revealed internet searches 2 months before the shooting. Ambien overdose, buy purple foxglove, Viagra. She had spent over a year quietly draining Alan's bank accounts through 11 forged checks totaling $16,000. She had taken out new financial documents, changed beneficiaries. The WTF moment. 40 days before the shooting, Miriam had wedged a cotton wick into Alan's car's full gas tank while he sat inside. He escaped the resulting fire using cups of water. Delta police immediately identified her as the arsonist. She knew they were watching. She shot him anyway. After fleeing to Florida, she stole the identity of Alan's deceased first wife, using the dead woman's driver's license to open accounts. When police found her, her computer contained digital images of 39 different driver's licenses ready for use. She was convicted on all 14 counts. First-degree murder, attempted murder, 11 counts of forgery. As of 2026, Miriam Helmick has spent over 16 years in the Denver Women's Correctional Facility. She is 67 years old, Pot 5 serving life without parole, plus 108 additional years. Every appeal has been denied, including one rejected as recently as April 2024. Colorado holds her for life. The next woman walked free after 32 years, and the circumstances of her release are almost as controversial as her crime. Case 8, Elizabeth Roxanne Haysom, March 30, 1985, Bedford County, Virginia. The bodies were discovered by a neighbor who noticed the family dog wandering outside alone. Inside the home, Derek Haysom, 72 years old, 5 retired steel executive, and Nancy Haysom, 53 years old, socialite and artist, had been brutally murdered. The dining room looked, in the words of investigators, like a slaughterhouse. Both had been stabbed repeatedly. Nancy's throat was nearly severed. Their daughter Elizabeth was a 19-year-old Eccles scholar at the University of Virginia. The kind of student people described as brilliant, cultured, magnetic. She had an alibi, movie tickets, room service receipts, a hotel stay in Washington, D.C., 150 miles away. The alibi was perfect. It was also a setup. Elizabeth's boyfriend, 18-year-old Jens Soering, drove south while she stayed behind, creating the paper trail. He had dinner with her parents. An argument began over their relationship. Point 5, and then he killed them both, cleaned up as best he could, and drove back to Washington covered in blood. A bloody barefoot print at the scene matched Soering, not Elizabeth, but investigators believed Elizabeth was the mastermind, that she had manipulated a besotted teenager into slaughtering her parents so she could claim her inheritance and keep the relationship her parents. 5 were trying to destroy. When police closed in, the couple fled Europe, Asia, using forged identities for almost a year, until British police arrested them in London for check fraud. In 1987, Elizabeth Haysom pleaded guilty to accessory to murder and was sentenced to 90 years. She served 32. In 2019, the Virginia Parole Board released her. As a Canadian citizen with felony convictions, she was immediately deported. As of 2026, Elizabeth Haysom lives as a private citizen in Canada, permanently barred from entering the United States, after serving 37 years since her arrest. A woman who orchestrated murder from a hotel room. The next woman orchestrated something even longer. a decade-long secret held by a 10-year-old child, Case 9. Judith Hawkey, November 3, 2003. Mark Center, Ohio. A 10-year-old boy called 911 and reported that he had accidentally shot his father. Emergency crews arrived to find Robert Brininger dead in his bedroom, a single shotgun wound to the head. His wife, Judith, arrived shortly after and was seen in the ambulance with the boy, repeatedly telling the crying child to stop crying. Witnesses noted she seemed cold. The boy seemed terrified. For 9 years, the case was officially closed as an accident. Judith collected approximately $500,000 in life insurance. The boy grew up carrying the secret. In 2012, that boy, now 19, attended a baseball game and ran into his former elementary school teacher. He broke down. He told her everything. Judith Hawkey had spent years convincing her stepson that his father was terminally ill and suffering. She told the child that shooting him would be an act of mercy. She coached him on exactly what to say to police. She arranged to take her other children out that day, leaving the boy alone with his father. Then she immediately filed the insurance paperwork the next morning. The WTF moment. Insurance documents revealed Judith had quietly changed the beneficiary forms on Robert's policies, explicitly removing the stepson as a beneficiary. Before the shooting, she was indicted in 2013. Her first trial ended in a life sentence. An appeals court threw it out on evidentiary grounds. Rather than face a second trial, she entered an Alford plea in 2019, acknowledging the prosecution had sufficient evidence without formally admitting guilt. She was sentenced to 10 years with over 5 already served. Based on her 2019 sentencing and credited time, Judith Hawkey completed her sentence approximately 2023 to 2024. Whether she lives quietly or has faced further legal scrutiny, her current status remains unconfirmed in public records. A child forced to carry murder for a decade. The next case involves a secret that lasted less than 24 hours and ended over $20. Case 10. Kayla Henriques, February 28, 2011. East New York, Brooklyn. Kamisha Richards was 22 years old. A John Jay College of Criminal Justice graduate. A JP Morgan Chase employee. She had just taken the LSATs. Her dream was to become a criminal defense lawyer, inspired, her mother said, by watching Matlock as a little girl. On Sunday, February 27th, Kamisha noticed that the $20 she had loaned her friend, money meant for baby formula, had not been spent on baby formula at all. She posted about it publicly on Facebook. The response came back fast. "Don't try to expose me, Mama, but I'm not the type to thug it over Facebook. See you when you get from work." Kamisha fired back, "Trust, I will have the last laugh." The reply was 3 words, "We will see." The next evening, around 10:30 at night, Kamisha and 18-year-old Kayla Henriques, who was also the sister of Kamisha's boyfriend, got into a violent physical confrontation inside a ground-floor apartment at the Cypress housing complex on Sutter Avenue. Kayla stabbed her once. The wound was fatal. Kamisha Richards was rushed to Brookdale Hospital and pronounced dead. The WTF moment. While Kamisha was dying, someone posted from Kayla's phone to her Facebook page. "I can't believe this happened. I'm sorry. I send my condolences to her family. Rest in peace. Me, Kamisha." Police used the entire Facebook exchange as primary evidence. Kayla Henriques was arrested the following day, Tuesday, March 1st, 2011, and charged with murder and criminal possession of a weapon. She was 18 years old. She had a 1-year-old child. And she had just ended the life of a woman who was on her way to defending people in court. Current court records beyond the initial arrest are not available in public documentation. $20. A Facebook argument. A life over. The next case involves a woman whose motive was far more complex and far more chilling. Case 11. Carol Ann Hatley, July 29th. Let's, 2012. Phoenix, Arizona. At 3:30 in the morning, Carol Hatley walked out of her house and knocked on her neighbor's door. She was heavily intoxicated. She said her mother had died and she needed help. Her neighbor, Regina Martinez, noticed she wasn't covered in blood, just drunk. She helped Carol back inside to wait for emergency services. Right before they entered the front door, Carol said quietly, "Oh, it was so bloody." Martinez asked, "What was so bloody?" Carol said it was so bloody. Phoenix police arrived to find 73-year-old Deborah Ann Hatley dead and already in the process of being dismembered. Carol Hatley was 51 years old, severely alcohol dependent, and had moved back into her elderly mother's home 10 months earlier. Family members described their relationship as strained. 05 their history as turbulent. What investigators pieced together from Carol's own statements was this: she had found, or created, the situation at 7 in the evening. Previous night, she did not call police. For 7.5 hours she remained in the house with her mother's body, tampering with evidence, 5 handling the weapons, and beginning the process of dismemberment. Large garbage bags were found at the scene, which police believed were intended to transport the remains, the WTF moment. When detectives asked Carol why she had wrapped her mother's body in plastic bags, she told them she was going to take her to the hospital. She showed no emotion. Detectives described her as extremely passive. She described her mother's injuries to investigators in graphic detail, without being asked. Investigators called her clearly deceptive. She was charged with second-degree murder. In April 2013, Carol Hatley was sentenced to 22 years in prison. As of 2026, Carol has served nearly 13 years of that sentence. She has been sitting in an Arizona state prison cell, with her mother's death still as the last image between them. A daughter who dismembered her own mother. But the next woman made an entire community her target, and sat in court for years saying nothing. Case 12. Linda T. Henning, September 9, 1999, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Gurley Chu Hassenkoft was 36 years old. A Malaysian-born bank teller, barely 90 pounds, and absolutely terrified weeks before she disappeared. She told her co-workers, "If I don't show up for work one day, go straight to my husband." She told an FBI agent the same thing. She knew she was in danger. She knew who the danger was. On September 10th, she didn't show up for work. Her estranged husband, Diazien Hassenkoft, born Armand Chavez, was a career con artist who had convinced multiple women he was a CIA operative, a brilliant surgeon, and, in court testimony, he delivered with a straight face, an ancient shape-shifting reptilian alien. He was also simultaneously engaged to 3 different women. One of them was Linda T. Henning, 48 years old, former fashion model. 05, former fashion designer. A woman friends described as sharp and sophisticated, until she attended a UFO believers meeting in the summer of 1999, met Diazien, and within weeks had abandoned her fiancé to be with him. Friends hired a private investigator. Every single credential Diazien had ever claimed was fabricated. Linda didn't care. When Gurley disappeared, investigators searched her apartment and found drops of Linda Henning's blood, interspersed directly with Gurley's blood on the carpet. A gray tarp and Gurley's clothing were recovered along a remote New Mexico highway, soaked in blood. Gurley's body has never been found. Diazien took a plea deal. Linda went to trial. The jury convicted her of felony murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. The WTF moment? Prosecutors revealed at sentencing, kept from the jury to avoid prejudicing the case, that Henning had allegedly told 4 separate individuals she had consumed the victim's flesh. As of 2026, Linda Henning has spent over 26 years incarcerated in the New Mexico state prison system. Gurley Chu has never come home, a victim who predicted her own death, and was right. The next woman also saw what was coming. She just made sure no one else did. Case 13. Lindsay April Haugen, September 15, 2015. Billings, Montana. They had known each other for 28 days. Lindsay Haugen was 32 years old, a decorated military veteran, a National Guard sergeant, a Black Hawk helicopter gunner, who had deployed to Kuwait and was described by commanding officers as someone her unit couldn't function without. She had survived 10 years of military service and a succession of violently abusive relationships that left her diagnosed with severe PTSD and battered woman syndrome. Robert Mast was 25, a drifter, seasonal worker, traveling state to state. He and Lindsay met in August 2015 and had been on the road together ever since, drinking heavily, sober together, she later said, for only 4 days out of 28. On September 15th, they pulled into a Walmart parking lot in Billings to eat pizza and drink wine in the car. Robert told Lindsay he wanted to die. She said she could make that happen. He said he was serious. She climbed into the back seat, wrapped her arm around his neck, and used her hands to cover his nose and mouth. He fought. He foamed at the mouth. She held on for 20 full minutes until he stopped moving. Then she drove 8 blocks to a Domino's parking lot. At 4:55 in the afternoon, police pulled her over after reports of erratic driving. She was performing CPR on Robert in the passenger seat, screaming. He was already dead. The WTF moment? In her confession, Haugen told detectives that when Robert asked her to kill him, she saw it as an opportunity she had always wanted to try. To kill someone with her bare hands. In June 2016, Judge Gregory Todd sentenced her to 60 years in prison. As of 2026, Lindsay Haugen has spent nearly 11 years inside the Montana State Women's Prison. She is 42 years old. Her earliest possible release would come decades from now, a Walmart parking lot, 20 minutes, and a confession that silenced a courtroom. The next woman silenced an entire country. Case 14. Olga Hepnarová, July 10, 1973. Prague, Czechoslovakia. Before she drove the truck into the crowd, she mailed a letter. It arrived at local newspapers the same day as the attack. So they received it and the news simultaneously. It read, "I am a wreck ruined by people. You are paying for them. I, Olga Hepnarová, a victim of your brutality, sentence you to death by vehicle." She was 22 years old. Olga had spent her entire life in psychological pain, a childhood she described as unfeeling, a year in a psychiatric ward at 13 after a suicide attempt, and a profound inability to connect with a world she felt had always treated her with contempt. She was quiet, solitary, and, by the time of the attack, completely decided. She spent 6 months planning it. She considered derailing a train, bombing a crowded room, opening fire at Wenceslas Square with an automatic weapon. She abandoned each plan methodically, one by one, until she settled on a heavy commercial truck and a crowded tram stop. On July 10th at 1:30 in the afternoon, Olga Hepnarová drove a Praga RN truck off the road and onto a sidewalk at Strassmayer Square in Prague's 7th district. She deliberately used a downhill slope to accelerate into a crowd of approximately 30 people waiting for a tram. 8 people were killed, all of them elderly, the youngest 60 years old. 12 more were severely injured. When bystanders rushed to help her out of the truck, assuming a terrible accident, she told them she had done it on purpose. She demanded the death penalty throughout her trial. The court obliged. Olga Hepnarová was executed by hanging on March 12, 1975, in the basement of Pankrak prison in Prague. She was 23 years old. She remains the last woman ever executed in the history of Czechoslovakia. A letter that arrived with the news of the crime. The next woman fled toward her victim instead of away, and it destroyed her. Case 15. Adrienne Emily Hickson, December 21, 2005. Duluth, Georgia. Sean Washington was 24 years old. He drove a bread truck. He served on the usher board at Trinity Baptist Church. He was, by all accounts, a steady, quiet, decent young man. He was standing in his apartment complex parking lot that evening, telling his friend Monique that he was going upstairs to end the relationship. His girlfriend had been acting erratically for days, timing his every movement, calling constantly, accusing him of cheating. He went inside. 10 minutes later, he came back out, covered in blood, clutching his shoulder. With a look on his face, Monique later testified, like he had already gone somewhere far away. "She stabbed me," he said. Monique and her boyfriend rushed him to the hospital. He kept saying, "I'm gone, I'm gone." He wasn't wrong. Shawn Washington died 4 days later from his injuries. By 5, his girlfriend, 24-year-old Adrienne Hickson, a law student at Howard University, had driven 600 miles to South Carolina the moment it happened. 4 days later, on Christmas morning, she drove back. She walked into the hospital to visit. Shawn's staff told her he was dead. She ran directly into a glass door, collapsed, had to be moved to a quiet room in a wheelchair. And then, while police were waiting to arrest her, she disappeared into the hospital and changed into stolen medical scrubs to disguise herself as an employee. She was still arrested, charged with murder. The trial ended in a hung jury. Adrienne entered an Alford plea and was sentenced to 5 years. She was released from prison in 2010. She has been free for over 15 years. What became of Shawn Washington's family, his mother, his brothers, his church, the record doesn't say. She walked out, he never did. And in our case, a woman nearly walked out of death row itself, stopped only by her own body giving out. Case 16, Lynn Henderson, January 21, 1994. Pflugerville, Texas. Brandon Baugh was 3.5 months old. His parents left him with their regular babysitter, Cathy Lynn Henderson, a woman from Missouri who had been caring for him without incident. By the end of that day, he was gone. When Brandon's mother returned to collect him, both the baby and Cathy had disappeared without a trace. No note, no message, no explanation. Just silence. The FBI launched a national search. 9 days later, they found Cathy Lynn Henderson in Kansas City, Missouri. She told investigators the baby had accidentally fallen and hit his head. She panicked, she said. She didn't know what to do. She had placed his body inside a wine cooler box, driven north, and buried him in a shallow grave in a wooded field near Waco, 60 miles from the house. She left the shovel lying beside the grave. She had been driving away ever since the WTF moment. Her own defense attorney obtained a hand-drawn map from Cathy showing the exact burial location, believing it was necessary to find the child's body. That map was subsequently subpoenaed by the state and used to locate the grave and charge her with capital murder. The medical examiner testified the injuries were caused by intentional force. Impossible, he said, to result from an accidental fall. In 1995, Cathy was convicted and sentenced to death. She sat on death row for nearly 20 years. In 2012, the same medical examiner filed an affidavit recanting his testimony, saying advances in science had proven a short fall onto hard concrete could cause exactly those injuries. Her conviction was overturned. A retrial was scheduled. In June 2015, Cathy Henderson accepted a plea deal, 25 years with credit for time served. She was projected to be released within 4 years. She never made it. Cathy Lynn Henderson died in a hospital in Austin, Texas, on August 2, 2015, just weeks after the plea was signed. She was 58 years old. She had been in the system for over 21 years. Case 17, Her, September 3, 1998. St. Paul, Minnesota. The 911 call came in on a Thursday evening. The dispatcher heard a woman's voice, calm and broken at the same time. "Well, I killed the kids. I don't know why I killed the kids." Officers arrived at a public housing townhouse on Timberlake Road and found Khoua Her lying on the floor just inside the doorway wearing a red dress and extension cord loosely around her neck. One child was directly behind her. The other 5 were found throughout the apartment. All 6 were gone. Khoua Her was 24 years old. A Hmong refugee who had fled Laos as a baby, survived years in a Thai refugee camp, endured an arranged marriage at 12, and by 20 had given birth to 6 children, 1 almost every year. She lived in poverty, in a housing project in St. Paul, with no Hmong-speaking mental health support available to her, facing eviction and convinced that no one would love her children if she was gone. She called each child into the room, the oldest first, the youngest last. She used a piece of black cloth. Then she put on the red dress, tied an extension cord to a second-floor light fixture, and jumped. The fixture broke. She survived. The defense argued she was acting out of a horrifically distorted love, certain her children would suffer without her. Unable to see any other option, the prosecution had the 911 tape. On December 2, 1998, Khoua Her was sentenced to 50 years in prison. As of 2026, Khoua Her has spent over 27 years inside the Minnesota Department of Corrections. She is 52 years old. She will not be eligible for parole until 2032, when she will be 58, having spent more than half her life in a prison cell for the deaths of her 6 children, 17 women. 17 crimes that don't fit the stories we tell ourselves about who is capable of violence. A dance instructor, a Sunday school teacher, a war veteran, a doctor, a mother, a daughter. The truth that every one of these cases forces us to confront is this: there is no single face of evil. There is only the moment someone makes a choice, and the people who are left behind carrying the weight of that choice forever. Subscribe to Capital True Crime. Share this with someone who needs to understand what these stories mean. Stay aware. Stay safe. This has been Capital True Crime. We'll see you in the next one.